Hello and welcome. So today, as you can probably guess, we're going to do something a little different. So the reason that Brittany is on the screen right now is that we're going to discuss about what makes a person happy, uh, and then why it's been kind of the case that a lot of the most our famous celebrities and a lot of people that we think have everything are often the most depressed. So let's start with the example of Britney, because Britney was, I'm going to say around the year 2000 or so, literally kind of had everything working for her. So she was beautiful. She had her youth. She had kind of a sweet temperament that most people really connected with and really liked her. Uh, she she is incredibly successful in what she wanted to be successful at, which is being a musician, and she even extended that to be relatively successful in movies as well, and literally could have anything she wanted. And kind of near the height of this time, she sort of had I mean, for lack of a better word, sort of a breakdown. She shaved her head, and then there was this whole thing about her issues that she was having, and about kind of what was the thing that was bothering her was kind of a question that a lot of people had. Didn't make sense to a lot of people. You could say the same thing about people that are like celebrities or are wild kind of trust fund type kids. Seem to have it all, but a lot of times these are the people with a lot of addictions and a lot of depression. And there's some good arguments for why that could be just a logical thing, right? Like because they have access to try a lot of drugs because they have the money. They also have parents that are off and away. That makes sense. But I think there's something beyond that. And I'm kind of augmenting this idea with a bunch of other examples. So kind of be patient here. What we're told is that we want these things sort of in order. So the person, and this is kind of, it's not exactly like the modum operandus of what everybody thinks is the most important things, but this is kind of the basis and sort of what people in the general sort of milieu ideas out there kind of believe is the most important thing. So the first level here is uh, physiological. So things like food and water, shelter to a certain degree, just your body's needs as a biological animal. So if all this stuff won't matter at all, if you're starving to death, right? So you need that one met first, and then you get to safety. So if you're being under threat, obviously you still got to be not starving, but you're not going to be worried about love or belonging or esteem if you're being chased by a gun, a guy with a chased by a gun, chased by a person with a gun. Love and belonging would be the next one. So if you get these two and they seem like they're secure, you'll eventually get love and belonging, and then you get up to esteem after that, and you try to build yourself up as an individual more and more until you become more self-actualized. And although I think this makes a lot of logical sense to people, I would say that this doesn't really seem to be what is the reality of the situation. If we looked at Brittany, for example, she has all these met, maybe besides the top one. And she had kind of a breakdown. And I can give a lot of other examples of people in that similar position that seem to have it all. And they still are super depressed and almost seemingly more depressed than they would be if they didn't have those things. And it's a vexing kind of idea as to why. But I'll give you an idea of potentially. So what I would say, and the idea I'm going to put forward is going to take a few slides to kind of get out here. So be a little patient. But remember this picture we showed of love, and how these animals and what's not shown in the picture here is obviously they're chasing something that's going along an inner ring of the track. So usually this is like a synthetic squirrel type thing or synthetic rabbit, and they're chasing it. And the key to it is that they can never really catch it. So in their mind, as you can see with his eyes, In their mind, they think that they're chasing the thing that they want the most and the thing that's going to kind of give them fulfillment. If they ever did catch it, they would get this sort of synthetic taste in their mouth. Uh, it would be probably the worst thing that could happen to a dog that's supposed to be racing after this. It's because they would realize that it wasn't what they were looking for, really. Once they get it, they realize that, hey, everyone, this doesn't seem to be what I wanted. It's kind of an illusion that he has in his head that we're chasing. And that's sort of what that lady that was mentioning, when we used this before, we talked about the romantic novelist. And she was saying it's sort of that moment of almost capturing it that is what we're after. Because once we capture it, like she said, we sort of take it for granted. And speaking of love here. So, why do we think that is? Another example we could give, actually, and I don't know if I have a picture of this. No, it's not here right now. Another example we could give is a lot of these countries that talk about being the happiest. So we have some of these ones that are usually on the top of the list. Basically, all the Nordic ones, which are these sort of socialist havens. And I have no problems against socialism at all, and I think it's worked fairly well for them. But all these countries that supposedly on the highest of the happiness index, we have the highest levels of antidepressants taken by the people. So again, we have this sort of contradictory evidence as opposed to what you think the logic would be. What I'm going to say that's happening here is that we have this sort of outer layer. So when somebody fills out a form about whether they're happy or sad, they'll kind of go through that same hierarchy we were talking about before, right? We have the Maslow's hierarchy of the triangle. And then they'll kind of evaluate sort of what they're supposed to want and realize that they have most of it and realize that they're generally doing okay. Like they're not worried about starving. They're not worried about anything else. They've got enough happiness in their life, sort of. And they'll say, okay, I'm happy. And then they'll fill out the form saying they are happy. But that is just this part of the brain. So we talked about the different levels needing different things. So the limbic brain wants that connection idea. And you can make the argument that a lot of these cultures that are everybody's out for themselves in these individualistic cultures, you lose that collective feeling. So you would have problems with this limbic part of the brain, right? Because it would be kind of going against that. This would be the animal part of we showed that person riding the elephant. The person has different needs than the elephant does, and if you don't have a sense of community, if you don't, and a lot of the different they do a lot of research as far as what communities seem to be the longest lifespans and stuff like that, and then they're usually these places that have this sense of community. But the one we haven't talked about, and what I'm going to say that we're looking for, is this one. What we're not getting from all this experience of having everything we think we want is we're missing out on what this one wants. And I'll explain it a little bit more by a few other means here. If we look at C.S. Lewis's quote, and keep in mind he's a Christian writer, so this is going to be obviously have a spiritual tone to it. C.S. Lewis wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a very famous book. And he was a university professor. I'm not sure if he had his PhD or not, but I know that he was a very acclaimed professor at Cambridge, so one of the most famous university there is. And this is one of his quotes, and one of the ones that I think is interesting if you think about all that I've told you so far. If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we are made for another world. So I obviously don't want to make you guys feel uncomfortable, but when we talked about those different levels, if we're talking about another world, it'd be that one that we're saying that is in behind those other ones. So this one, and this isn't exactly accurate either, but it'll work for now as sort of the only thing we know. So what Carl would say is that we're looking for something else that we can't meet in this world. So there's nothing that is going to fill up that part of ourselves because we're only going to be trying to look for a sort of cheap replacement of it in this world. Nothing will completely satisfy us. Let's look at this as far as a monk. And what's really interesting about a monk is he sort of deprives himself as much as he can. And he doesn't try to reason through anything. He doesn't try to gain sort of people's respect or be able to make himself into a hierarchy over anyone else. There's no really feeling of community in a lot of these places. A lot of times people, especially yogis, will go off on their own and they'll spend years sometimes inside of a cave. How does that make any sense? How does that make any sense that somebody could do that and that would be a fulfilling life for them? It doesn't make any sense in the way we perceive the world. But what they would say is that they're connecting with something else. Once they remove that sort of, and forgive me, I don't want to like overbeat this kind of idea, but when they remove the sort of vortex of movement in between, all that's left is what was before. So they're removing all the impetus of what seems to be the senses are creating, the sort of movement of between the opposites, which the world kind of represents, being a dualistic world mostly, and they just try to remove any thought that could create counterbalance. They're trying to return to a feeling of oneness, and maybe this should be telling us something. So I don't know how much I'm going to go into all these, but why does a monk not have the desires of mankind? So let's look at what we think we want in the world. So if this is true, what C.S. Lewis says, uh, we have this urge, which is the sexual urge, seems to be pretty strong in most of us. We have a community urge, a love urge, a breathing urge, a food and water urge. We also yearn for knowledge, or urge have an desire for knowledge, justice, hierarchy, and innocence. And this one's a little bit debatable, but I think if you give me a little bit of time, I'll kind of prove that that's sort of not, or sort of, it's sort of immutable. But but these are the things that we if we're living in the world, we're trying to recreate here. So you may think of this as kind of like a contradiction to what I just said, because that person that is removing everything, why would he be needing all of these things too? He's still in the world, obviously. But the reality is that once you're removing the synthetic ones for each of these, then the natural will show to be always true, and these outer two layers are always true. And the world of what some people would say is the world of perception, the world of the outside our triangle here, is not necessarily true, but us trying to make truth of our own situation. Kind of remember, we talked about the brothers Karamazov and the Grand Inquisitor, this being Ivan's story. So Ivan talked about the Grand Inquisitor that told Jesus that, okay, we don't need you anymore. We only want rules. We only want bread. If we get that, you're in the way of the church if you come back. Nobody's looking for anything beyond that anymore. So this is what he told, and I love this picture. I think this picture is absolutely perfect for this situation. It's not like it's a lot of times when they do a depiction of this scene, they sort of have him as malicious looking, and if Jesus would be facing him, I would imagine, but we can at least see both of their faces at this moment, and I feel like this would be the way that Dostoevsky would have wanted this scene to be depicted. This is him saying that we're not looking for anything that the world beyond anymore. What Robert said, so our guy, Robert Pirsig, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, is that said that we're trying to create what we need in the world because we're missing something. So what we've done before, we try to connect with something above ourselves. So we try to connect with God during a lot of eras, through most eras of civilization. We have always had something hierarchy, like a hierarchy above us, and we were sort of lesser players in the situation. His argument that he gave, and I think this argument holds true for today as well, is that we have made a new church now, and this is a church of reason, as he called it. So Aristotle's ideas, Aristotle's sort of reason, Aristotle considered us, human beings, as just rational animals. The animals with reason. We were only animals, but we had reason as the only thing that we had beyond. So we've created this now of this Church of Reason. And it's really quite interesting if you look at some of the early sort of Enlightenment pictures of people fighting like superheroes, fighting against people that didn't have reason. So people that were seen as people that put out magical ideas or put out non-scientific ideas. There was pictures of people hitting them with like lightning bolts and stuff like that, and these are supposed to represent reason taking them out. It's kind of interesting because it's almost like we're creating again these sort of notions of hierarchies and gods uh, in this new system we have, where sort of reason is the thing that we've put on the pedestal above all the rest of everything else. And then we sort of have people sort of like the church that are in positions where they're kind of telling us what we should believe. So you could relate maybe to priests and bishops, different members of faculties, but it's interesting that this idea that we seem to be making the same sort of concepts come out as soon as we think we get rid of them. So we think we say, okay, we removed sort of divinity from the world because we're just reasonable now. But then we build up reason as to be a divinity. So it's kind of an interesting concept. But anyway, I think that's enough for today. Just kind of wanted to put this idea out there. Let me know if you guys have any ideas that you want to contribute or anything you think that disproves what I'm saying. So I'd really like to hear from you. But anyway, that's enough for today. Like I say, talk to you later. Bye.